The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are pleased to welcome back Pennsylvania Speaker of the House of Representatives, Joanna McClinton, a Democrat from Philadelphia. Joanna is a lifelong resident of Philadelphia and a graduate of Grace Temple Christian Academy. She became active in her community and went on to earn her degree in political science from LaSalle University. She continued her postgraduate education by earning a Juris Doctorate from Villanova University School of Law. While there, she interned at the Regional Housing Legal Services, as well as at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. As a lawyer, she became Chief Assistant Public Defender for Philadelphia. In 2013, she became Chief Counsel to Pennsylvania Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, where she was integrally involved in policy development and legislation. Among her many distinctions, she was named to Philadelphia's and Pennsylvania's top 40 under 40 list. Also, the Barristers Association, Philadelphia's Outstanding Young Lawyer of the Year, Fun Time Magazine's Women of Influence Award, and the Black Gala Women of Excellence Award. Joanna was elected to the House of Representatives in 2015. She entered leadership in 2018 by being elected as the Democratic Caucus chairwoman, and in November 2020, she was elected Democratic House Leader, the first ever African American to have that post. We look forward to discussing her first 6 months in office, the new commission to address the funding disparities in Pennsylvania education that were found to be unconstitutional by the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, as well as the new bill signed into law to provide property tax relief for seniors, as well as the fight over Governor Shapiro's line item veto of the funding for the school choice program. A lot of good topics to hear from her on.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Madam Speaker, it's great to have you back to the Volpe Report.
It's great to be back.
Let's start with kind of what we talked about. It's been a very eventful year. Uneasy lies the head, as Shakespeare wrote, that wears the crown. So talk a little bit about, now that you have some perspective of a half a year under your belt, you look back, we've gone through summer, we're back to the fall term, kind of assess where things stand in Pennsylvania.
So it's great to be back, Chuck, and I appreciate in every phase of my political career, only this year, you have been a part of the conversation, letting the neighbors know what's going on in Harrisburg. So you're right. Unfortunately, although we won in 102 districts in November, it took a while for me to actually run to be the Speaker of the House, and I'm grateful that it's just been 6 months now. And in 6 months, my colleagues have been listening to our constituents in every corner of the Commonwealth, and we have advanced 150 bills, and 90% of them are bipartisan. They are bills where Republicans have been supportive. They're on issues like changing our property tax rent rebate program, making sure seniors in every community are able to get money back, the money that they've spent the year prior. It was long overdue. It took 20 years to get across the finish line, but it's one of the third bills that Governor Shapiro signed. So we've been doing good. We have a lot of things we've accomplished, and you're right, we still have a lot of unfinished business.
We had, and I had been, extremely optimistic based on the governor's budget address, Josh Shapiro, our governor, of the effectively praise for his budget, bipartisan support. Most of the Republican leadership, Kim Ward, Joe Pittman, who's been on the show also a couple times, the majority leader, Republican majority leader in the Senate, basically praising the governor for, unlike Governor Wolf, that for 8 years pretty much was dead on arrival budget submissions. So it looked well. And most of it did go well, and it went fluid. But then again, there were a few flies in the ointment. The biggest one being, there were a couple, but the biggest one being the issue of school choice. The Republicans had felt that the governor had promised during his campaign in his rhetoric that he was going to support the voucher system and school choice for Pennsylvania students. And then their view of it was that he then took it out of the budget. He didn't have it there. And I'm going to let you speak for the Democratic House because you're a player in this. The governor's response was, no, what I said in negotiations was that I would support it, but you had to get the deal done with the Democratic majority and you basically effectively in the House, and that had not occurred. And so he basically line item veto it. So can you put some perspective? That's gotten a lot of press attention up here, obviously. And we're getting now, I believe, from the horse's mouth, one of the most powerful people in government, a person that's in charge of the House and the Democratic leadership. Can you walk us through your view of what happened and where does all this stand now?
Absolutely. So Governor Shapiro did his budget proposal just 1 week after I became speaker. It was the beginning of March, and it was just a few weeks, combined January, February, March of him being the governor. And he laid out a great proposal that put money back in the pockets of our taxpayers and really invest in our schools. So by the time we get to June, the conversations get more serious on both sides of the aisle and both sides of the building. It's like, all right, put your money down now. You can't just talk anymore. You can't have a press conference. It's time to vote. It's time to vote. So in the bill that we sent June the 5th, we were very serious about education funding because we know, especially up in NEPA, counties like Monroe, Pike, Sullivan, Berks, Wayne, Lehigh, Lackawanna, Northampton, you have a very serious tax burden for your school district. And some of the ways that we can reduce those costs as Democrats is to fairly fund every public school and to make sure that we finally reform our cyber charter academies. They do not have the same costs as our regular charter schools and our brick and mortar district schools, but they're getting the same money. And that means more money out of your pockets. And when we talk about a voucher system, it's even more money out of taxpayer pockets. So we did not get into an agreement in June or even July, but this fall we're launching a listening tour that's going in every corner of the Commonwealth so that we can hear from parents, we can hear from teachers, but most importantly, we can hear from you who are watching at home to tell us if you support this scholarship program and if that is something that we can build a consensus on, we can get a way forward. But we can never forget, Chuck, the Commonwealth Court told us in February with an 800-page opinion that we as a legislative body have not been doing enough for public education. In fact, the judge that wrote the opinion said that it's currently unconstitutional. So we have work to do to focus on public education. And my colleagues want to get to agreement and compromise, but we have to pay what we owe our school districts so that you taxpayers watching at home can have a little bit more for your families because you work hard for that.
In Scranton School District alone, there is apparently about $30 million a year. That's a lot of money if you're talking about just one school district in the state, a larger one to be sure, but $30 million every year that goes by that's not getting put into the Scranton School District that should be. So the issue of fair funding is very important. And as we talked about, and I'll let you describe a little more when I'm done, but basically my understanding is this commission will travel the state. There will be representatives, both Democrat and Republican in equal number, both in the House and the Senate. There will also be 3 additional members appointed by the governor to this commission. I'm also understanding that the first speaker, the first, I guess, witness, if you will, to offer this testimony is going to be the expert that wrote an opinion that the Commonwealth Court relied on in establishing that the funding was unconstitutional and illegal. So it's going to start pretty impressively with the bang. So take it from there and kind of, expand on what you've said and what I've just said in terms of how this commission is going to operate.
Yeah, so the Basic Education Funding Commission has a duty and a task to make sure that they hear from everyone, school board directors, superintendents, and not just in our cities, but in rural communities as well, in every part of the state. And they kicked it off in Allentown. They'll be traveling next all around, and they look forward to fixing our funding formula. They have the job at saying, okay, if we give this school district, $3, why are we giving them $3? Is it because of the number of students they have? Is it because of special needs the students have this day and age? Is it because their population has grown? Where should we look and see who we need to give more money to? And quite frankly, some of the larger tax bases where people are just richer and wealthier and bigger homes, and they can afford to sustain their own school districts, we can give a little less. And if we do that all over, we'll finally have enough so that, my Delaware County, my neighbors, they won't lose their homes. That's what happens. People can lose their homes over school board taxes. It's not right. We can do better, and we will.
Right. Would it be fair to describe the Republican point of view on their school choice program, which they advocate for allowing and giving parents the ability to send their children if the school district they feel is not up to the educational standards they would like, to give them the choice to go elsewhere? Is it fair to say that your response would be, well, if we make it fair with the funding, obviously that would mitigate some of what the school choice purposes are for? Is that a fair description?
Yes, that is true. It is true, but I want to be clear. We have been very supportive of options for parents. We already have supported the EITC program, the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, where companies, instead of sending their tax dollar directly to the Capitol, they're able to say, hey, I'm going to send it to this nonprofit that's going to give it to a school of faith or some other private school. We have been supportive of that. And in fact, in this budget, we increased it even more. And there's also the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit for children in low-income communities. We have been supportive of educational options for parents, but we cannot neglect this opinion that says, hey, you owe $5.5 billion to school districts across the state and start a new program. We can do more than one thing at one time, but we do have to prioritize because it's important. We recognize that sometimes the big high school, down the road, it's not the environment that's ideal for your son or for your daughter. So you want to know, what are my options? Where can I get more help? Where can I possibly get scholarships? But we have to make sure that we're not bearing a heavier tax burden, and because we haven't fulfilled our investment. We have to first fulfill our investment. The Constitution of Pennsylvania says you've got to provide every child a thorough and adequate education. We've not done that. So once we're able to do that, I'm open to the conversations. Our caucus is open to voting on these options, but we have to make sure it makes sense for everybody.
One of the issues, when I ran for senator, was a major issue back, and I'm going back a little ways now, but a major issue about our seniors who have paid off mortgages and live in their homes. The rising price of school taxes effectively on their property is forcing them effectively either sell, some are losing their homes in foreclosure because they can't pay that tax. So is there a program that you're talking about that will help alleviate or somehow shift some of that tax burden from the people who are like basically living on Social Security? They can't afford health care barely. So would you address that issue? Because that ties directly to school funding.
It definitely does. It's all connected. So I was able to speak with the governor in Scranton when he announced and first signed the bill. So essentially, we have a program called the Property Tax Rent Rebate Program, but who was eligible was very limited because the income guidelines have been the same since 2006. So if you got more, even Social Security, and perhaps a little more in your pension, you were not able to further qualify for this program. But the good news is the bill that passed the House, passed the Senate, and got to Governor Shapiro's desk with his signature, and he first signed it publicly in Scranton. I was standing right there with seniors from a senior center locally, is that finally the guidelines will have an escalator. So it will be connected to the cost of living. And the rebate, where it had normally been about $500 for seniors, is now up to $1,000. Wow. And the best news is there are 173,000 more seniors who will be able to apply for this program and get some money back in their pocket. So it is connected, and we have to make sure that they can stay in their homes, remain parts of our community, and not have to be looking over their shoulder at the tax collector in their boroughs.
Well, I wanted to ask that question because having been aware, obviously, of it, but hearing you speak on television now to our media market, we have a way above average age in Northeast Pennsylvania, as you're aware, and Central Pennsylvania. So I'm glad this will be another chance for them to hear. the thing I don't know myself, though, legitimately, and I would like to ask you about, is it in any way related to like the percentages for the COLA increases that already exist? Or is it in that ballpark, or is there something different in terms of how that escalator works?
Yeah, so that escalator is connected to cost of living adjustments that happen with Social Security on the federal level. So and we know it's not a lot of money. I mean, we say it as if they're somehow winning the lottery. It's not a lot of money, but it does help seniors sustain themselves and keep a roof over their head and food on their table. So if Washington, D.C. gives them a little increase, then our guidelines in Harrisburg for perpetuity will continue to increase as well, so that they won't be maxed out of this program.
Very good. It's a perfect time now, Madam Speaker, to take a quick break.
Now there's more places you can see the Volpe Report. Watch every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. on Fox 56. Listen on WILK Radio Sundays at 11:30 a.m. or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report. More ways to watch. Still the same premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians.
Let's start with a couple of issues that I've hit pretty hard. We've talked about things like the privatization of the Liquor Control Board, a very contentious subject. An issue I've hit pretty hard in Pennsylvania is the amount of monies we're not collecting on our turnpike. It's now into obviously 9 figures effectively. Well, at least 8 figures, I should say. No, I think it's 9. I think we crossed 100 million last year. So so talk about some of what your policy initiatives are on those subjects, but generally in your wish list of what you'd like to see get done by the end of this year. You have a Democratic governor, and the Senate is working with you.
It's very important that we collect all of our tolls on our turnpike. Since the pandemic, we've seen a significant decrease. And of course, that money goes towards supporting our highways being improved and safety conditions being addressed. So that is something we have to work with the Turnpike Commission and with the administration in Harrisburg on. It's very important that we're not leaving money on the table, and that especially travelers, they're not just zipping through Pennsylvania, not leaving us the toll when they get to Ohio, when they get to New York, wherever they're headed next. So it's important that we do that. Some of the other things that we want to accomplish this fall, we recognize that we have a lot more work to do to respond to the needs in our community. What do those needs look like? Well, we already talked about a big win for our senior citizens, but we've got to continue to support our working families. So that looks like making sure that we've passed some different tax credits, but they haven't come out of the Senate yet. Some of them would be credits to be able to take care of childcare costs, to reduce them. Give you a credit when you file your taxes, you pay childcare, you get a credit. I mean, how many parents are saying they're not going back to work, or they're making different working decisions based on the cost of childcare? We want to be able to do that. We want to make sure that we continue to, fight for and finally raise the minimum wage. It's embarrassing. West Virginia, Ohio, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Delaware all have a higher minimum wage in Pennsylvania, and we've been stuck at 7.25. So we're going to get in conversations with the Senate, try to get them to send us their number back. We want to raise it. We're not unrealistic. We know that it won't be, what it is in New York State. We're not delusional, but we do need to make sure that companies in our Commonwealth don't take it for granted because it's so low, but they're actually paying our workers for the hard work they do. Right. Speaking of workers, we've submitted a couple of bills to make sure that our construction workers are not getting subjected to wage theft. Sometimes people do not choose people with the training, the apprenticeship, the certification, and they just have folks on work sites and they don't know what they're doing. And that jeopardizes their lives. And most importantly, when we go in and out of those structures, it jeopardizes ours. They're not put together correctly. So worker misclassification is that we're hoping to get that bill back from the Senate. And we want to protect our public workers by extending OSHA. So we've had a lot of good bills. We sent out 150 something bills to the Senate, and we're hoping this fall they send them back. Because I learned, and I didn't know this, Chuck, as Speaker, I get to sign the bill before the governor does.
Wow.
So I'm hoping
I didn't know that.
to get a couple of signatures on bills to get them to Governor Shapiro's desk, because these are the types of pieces of legislation that really improve everyday life. It's not just another law in the book. It will really enhance and improve working conditions, making them safer, and it will continue to help people who are just out here every day trying to do their part and to support their families.
You know, Governor Wolf, I mentioned his budgets were usually dead on arrival for all those years. And he was pretty much a sticking point for him, as he wouldn't consider like anything less than $15 an hour, which we both know, quoting you, delusional, not going to happen. But there's an ocean between $7.50 dollars and $15. Is there a number that you think would be palatable to the Senate in your early conversations, $9 or $10 an hour? Is that something you think is somewhere in the game?
Yeah, so I don't have a number this day, but what I do know is that you mentioned an ocean being between 7 and 15. That's doubling it. All I know is that we got to give our workers a life jacket, a little row your boat there, give them an opportunity to get up the creek upstream. The Republicans who voted against our bill, which would get to 10 and then to 12, and then sometime in the future, a few years from now, get to 15, like 2026, they said, well, nobody makes it. I said, well, if nobody makes it, let's just raise it. You know, if companies aren't paying it anyway, we shouldn't be afraid to make sure they're not paying it to anybody. And so it's all about competition. You know, we've got warehouse industry, we've got large companies, and we also have startups. I started my day here in my district office with, now it's an international company started by 2 college kids down here in Philly. So we recognize that people are profiting off their ideas and off of manufacturing. We want to make sure that they're not underpaying our neighbors, because it only makes it harder for them to sustain themselves and their family.
You have a tenuous, Madam Speaker, 1-vote majority, obviously, in the House. That will be put to the test in 2024, obviously. Most or all of the seats will be up at that point. So your agenda has to be, in addition to all of your duties as legislating and creating policy and law for Pennsylvania, you also have to keep a majority to stay Speaker and to keep your agenda pushing forward. So what would be your take on what the message will be to Pennsylvania, which you'll participate in the messaging for Pennsylvania's House, Democratic messaging, as to why you should keep? And then the second part of the question is the trickier one. We have 2 right now very relatively unpopular choices for the American people. And President Biden, who a majority of Democrats say they'd rather someone else, and President Trump, who could very well be convicted of federal felonies and possibly facing a prison term by the time the nominating convention for the Republicans occurs next summer. So kind of, we'll touch on that second, but what would be your messaging as to why the Democrats have earned another 2 years to stay in the majority in the House of Pennsylvania?
Yes, so you're right. I've got a day job, and then I've got my outside the building day job. And that job is to defend our Democratic incumbents and to expand our majority. When I got elected in 2015, there were 121 Republicans to 82 Democrats. Now, we just went through the redistricting process. There will never be a margin that wide again. We have a very competitive map where it might at some point go the other way back to Republican, and within the next cycle go back the other way to Democrat. But I'll say that even as nice as I am, only way I'll be Speaker is if we have 102 Democrats at the end of next November's election. So that being said, I'm working really hard to just let people know in Pennsylvania what a difference a 1-seat majority makes. Some of the bills that we've passed have been held up for over 20 years. And these are wildly popular ideas, but because they were Democratic bills, they just never moved. Conversely, we have moved over 20 Republican pieces of legislation, more than a prior Speaker moved in the last 2 cycles of 2-year sessions in the House. And I'm proud of that, because we're showing that we're responsible to taxpayers, we're showing that we care about families, we're making sure that public education is key, and most importantly, we are respecting Pennsylvanians to make their own decisions. We're not forcing our way into the doctor's office like the Republican-controlled Senate and House did last year when they tried to force down constitutional amendments to take away our rights to vote and our right to make our own personal decision as women. We're not getting involved with that. We know when the government's not welcome. So we're respecting those boundaries, and we're showing people that the things we say, better jobs, better schools, safer communities, it's not just slogans. We're investing in our law enforcement. We're making sure that we are in communities that are protected, where people want to be proud that we're the badge and where they have the resources necessary to do their jobs. So I'd say give us another chance this November and next November when we're all on the ballot. But in terms of the presidential, it's unbelievable that it's here already. I haven't had 4 years go this quickly since, I don't know, the last 4 years.
And it
But
gets
that
worse when
being
you get to
said,
my age,
you
Madam
know,
Speaker. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, my mom says the same thing, and you're not even close to her age. She said, just wait till you have a baby that used to be a baby and is now in her 40s. I'm like,
Exactly.
but I'll tell you, the difference between President Trump and President Biden is one is from northeastern Pennsylvania,
Right.
and one is not.
Yes, of
And
course.
the biggest key, quite seriously, with President Biden especially, is he has shown a great deal of respect to the office that I personally appreciate. I know people have concerns about his age, his health. Thank goodness he continues to be strong, show up for America, and fight for America across the world every day. Through the pandemic, I know we don't always remember, but when he started, we still were not safe. We were having the masks, we didn't have
Sure.
vaccines. We were able to get through that crisis. And the state was able to get a ton of funding that we needed, and we spent wisely. We spent it to whole home repairs, and we started new programs for mental health, things that we're trying to renew through our own local budgeting process now in the state. President Biden was able to help us with that. The infrastructure, we saw a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh, and Mayor Gainey's, second week, it's back fixed. That bridge has been restored thanks to President Biden's leadership. Where I live down in Philly, 95 had a bridge to collapse, and sadly we lost a truck driver. But within 2 weeks, because of President Biden's leadership, getting all those agencies, all those labor unions working together, it was fixed in less than 2 weeks. And I was proud to stand out there with Governor Shapiro, when it was reopened. So I don't think we can undercut what President Biden's been able to achieve. And I don't think we can diminish the fact that President Trump, our former president, is still very popular. But we'll never forget that he circulated and spread that big lie that led to a very deadly insurrection on our nation's capital. And I don't want any parts of that in the future. So I just ask everybody to keep that in mind.
Well, let me tell you what, Madam Speaker, personally, want to compliment you. That was as good a closing as any lawyer could have made to a jury in what was a very hard and difficult question. You maybe should be up for promotion to the White House staff from your speakership to be a spokesman for the President of the United States. You took a hard question and you put forth the best Democratic response. I've heard a lot of very other important people beside yourself not do nearly as well with that question, including the Republicans that get asked the same one and what they're going to have to deal with if Trump is at the top of their ticket. Not a pleasant proposition for them, I can tell you. But at any rate, again, thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for making time. It's always personally enjoyable to do a show with you, and I always feel a little smarter when I'm done. So thank you. Keep up the good work for Pennsylvania.
Same here, Chuck. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks, Joanna.